Awesome. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 16th Annual CineYouth Festival Q&A for the Give Me Strength program. My name is Jacalyn, and I'm one of the and I'm on the CineYouth Programming Committee this year. And I just first off wanted to thank Adobe for sponsoring CineYouth and this program. Without their help, this definitely wouldn't be possible. So we're super grateful for that. And also super grateful that you all are able to be here right now for this Q&A. Thank you for taking your time, no matter where you are in the world. And we're super thrilled to be doing this Q&A. So just to start off, I'd love to do some intros. So if you can just introduce yourself and the film that you're representing. And let's start with Grace.
Sure. Hi, my name is Grace, and the film that I had in this festival was The Year That Passed. Should I elaborate anymore?
You can say a few words just so everyone watching kind of.
It was the black and white, really simple animation about like addiction and grieving. But yeah, it was kind of a memoir film, and it was just about me and my sister's experiences. We live in Pittsburgh, over a year of sort of repeating instances of trauma and how it affected me and my friendships and relationships. And yeah, it just covered the year and like how I grew as a person and how my sister grew.
Thank you so much. And next, Hannah.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Hannah Skierbeek, and I directed the film called An Alternative Method, which is about a woman's growing fear after she's followed on her way home from work. And my aim with the film was to explore the lengths that people will go to just in order to get rid of a feeling.
And last but not least, McKenna.
Hi, everyone. Again, thank you so much for having me. My name is McKenna Ryan, and my film, I'm here today with my film Moira, which was an animated short just about the heaviness of an anxious mind and following the character Moira's pursuit, or as she slips into the liminal and unconscious landscape of her mind, inspired by the uneasiness and like general like upside down state of the world at the beginning of the pandemic.
Well, thank you all for sharing, and thank you again all for being here. I really enjoyed all of your films. Something that I feel like I was really drawn to in all of your films was just like the worlds you created. I feel like they're all like really personal and distinct and had such like a distinct tone, and that's kind of what I want to focus on this Q&A and like the different ways that you all were able to portray those worlds. So I guess that like just to start off, my first question is for McKenna about like just like the otherworldliness that you kind of created in your film, and along with like the watercolor, but also your style of animation. I was just wondering like what your inspiration behind like choosing that specific style, and like how you even went about like picturing like what this like anxious feeling would look like.
Yeah, at the film started, I was like playing with watercolor, like in just for fun, and had it like animated project that I wanted to do, and had just gotten the app Procreate. A little shout out to that, and just playing around with the brushes. And I mean, I think watercolor is a fantastic medium when you're playing around with like shifting through spaces or moving through spaces, just because of like the ability to manipulate the medium and the heaviness of the textures. So being able to do that digitally was a lot of fun. But in terms of world building, the goal was really just to try and encapsulate that feeling of like inability to be like present, or inability to like step outside of this anxious state, as like also a self-exploration. So kind of having these, once I nailed down like the kind of the shots that I wanted to have that to convey that, it was really easy to do that. And then also not having it be like a confined world that this exists in. Yeah.
I find that like process really interesting. It sounds like really like embodied and just like That was really cool how you described watercolor as well. Um, and I guess like the same kind of question I just have for Grace and in terms of your animation style, I thought that like the black and white and like just simplicity of like your rotoscoping really helped to like portray like, I don't know, what memory feels like, even though that's like indescribable. So I was kind of wondering what your thought process behind choosing that style and like along with the like inverting the black and white and your incorporation of pictures.
Yeah, I think you definitely touched on something with inverting the black and white. I was sort of feeling like literally my world was upside down at that period of time, and it was a way to kind of sort of subtly suggest discomfort. In terms of the pictures and things I used for my world building, I definitely was looking at like old text messages and like diary entries and kind of thinking of it in a way of like archiving and like collecting these pieces and fragments of my life that I felt some type of emotional draw towards, but I couldn't really piece it together. Like I think the whole animation for me was about like fragmentation and how to get sort of floating bits of an image, but then there would be just blank space for a long time and like just my voice talking. So it was really important for me for there to be like a lot of breath happening and a lot of like just space throughout. So just like simple images that could dissipate and then there could be just space in my voice. Because yeah, I think sort of the ideas of inverse, the ideas of the void were like really important in that piece.
Yeah, I feel like you bringing up that idea of like voidness and like space, that I feel like that's also so reflected just in your animation, like with just black and white, like the black is like a void, but also the white is like a void. So thank you so much for sharing. And yeah, just another same sort of question for you, Hannah, about I was really interested in like the film feel. I'm not sure if you shot on film or what your process behind figuring out what the look of your film wanted to be. And yeah, just like would love to hear you talk about like this style and how you created your world.
Yeah, so it was not shot on film in the end, but we used digital Bolex that kind of replicates the look of 16 millimeter. And my reason for wanting the film look was to create kind of this timeless quality to it, because I think the film is exploring just one moment in this woman's life, but it extends beyond that time and it's dealing a lot with memory in the past. And so I wanted to capture that. And then also these ideas of like trauma and what she experiences in the film are not new ideas. They've been happening for a long time. So I wanted to have that feeling of expansion beyond what happens in the film. So there's going to be more experience for her in the future. These feelings aren't going away instantly. And then it's also tying back to the past where traumas can come from.
Did your like use of color and the lighting too, did that play a role into this idea of memory and like dream versus reality, or did you have another intention behind that?
Yeah, the lighting and the color was done to kind of blend the moments of realism and surrealism. So all of the scenes where she encounters the man were done. The camera movement also was all done with Steadicam for those scenes. And then also the lighting was a little bit more bright, especially when we see her encounter with the man. It's like almost like he's breaking through the frame. It gets so overexposed and white. So that was my intention there.
Thank you so much for sharing. And yeah, so moving more into like just world building and creating these feelings, I also feel like all of you created really interesting soundscapes and like use of scores. So I'd love to just talk about your processes behind finding out like what you wanted your sound design to be, but also like if you incorporated music, what drew you to that. So if we just want to start off with McKenna again, or if anyone wants to chime in, I would love to hear about it.
Sure. Yeah, I think the sound, I actually like tabled this project for like a full like 6 months because I knew I had an idea of what I wanted for sound, but it's like a skill I didn't have myself. And I had an incredible professor put me in contact with a sound designer that they have worked with. His name's Daniel Crook. He's incredible, did a fantastic job. And that process was like really fantastic, just working with someone who I was able to communicate what I was looking for in this kind of surreal landscape with like a little bit of sound design of like kind of identifying sounds that would bring you back to the present, but still kind of like immersed in like very loose like music that would build and kind of like crescendo at the end when the head comes apart. And just he was like incredible to work with and like making my like verbal ideas like come together and actually like actualize with the sound, which was an incredible process. But I would love to hear from like Hannah and Grace as well, because that's like my biggest struggle with the project is the sound.
Yeah, I can chime in here. I was fortunate to have Henry Hawks do the sound design and composing for the film. So I think he found a really nice balance between the score and the sound design. The score is just like this repeated keyboard notes throughout the whole film that gives it a consistency. But then there's moments of really intense sound design that we use to amplify her state of mind, which is really like what we were doing in the whole post-production process, is finding moments where we kind of enter the surreal side of the story, and the edit and the sound design came together to really amplify her emotions during those moments.
Yeah, I loved the soundscapes that both of you guys created. They were like just the mood that it evoked. I just love them both. But in terms of my process, it was again such a like mismatch, like a mashing together of a bunch of different like artifacts again, where initially my project was going to be a documentary. So I had actually like audio interviews and video interviews where I sat down with my sister, and it was just really hard to talk about, obviously. So I felt it was a little too exploitative. So I decided to go with animation. It could be more of my story and not as much on her. I didn't want to make her talk about it extensively. But in terms of just the soundscape, that really changed my opinion on how that would turn out. And so really what I was looking at was like old Snapchats, like social media, like videos I had taken with my friends when we were just like fooling around together. But I think it ended up working in my favor, where it did feel very like intimate, and it captured the moments that I was discussing, because I just went back through, you know, like all the videos you have on your phone and thinking, oh, this would work for this type of scene. Or so a lot of it was like my actual friends or me or my mom like talking about things. And so sort of for the year that I was doing this project, I was kind of creepy, and I would just like record things sometimes. I told my family about it, but I was like, if you ever see me like just recording, it's because I might use this for something. So I just had a ton of voice notes on my phone that I was looking at.
Yeah, that actually answers my question about like all of the computer clicks. I was like wondering about that, but now you explaining that like totally makes sense. Like just scrolling through social media and stuff. I feel like that's so effective in like the pacing and all those different moments that you're talking about. And then we have an audience question from McKenna regarding you were talking about like that mood of just like kind of like being like in this space that you can't really describe, and they're wondering like how you're creating that mood of like this liminal space and like feeling like you're floating a bit.
Yeah, I think honestly, when returning research, I think is like one of the most important phases of a film project. So even like returning to like readings on liminality and like the cusp, like being on the threshold of something, and like being between two spaces. And I felt that really resonated with this idea of like being overwhelmingly anxious, or like the anxiety that's not necessarily stress, but like an inability to escape what's going on mentally and what's going on like in front of you and externally. So yeah, I mean, and there's one scene where like Moira's literally floating, so there's that. But then also like having her move through spaces that aren't like distinguishably like physical or locational, like you can't locate where they are. And playing with smoke as like something, as well as something that passes through something, to really like kind of push like being on the threshold of something or being not completely in one spot or the other.
Thank you so much. That's all super interesting, and kind of plays into another question I had for both you and Hannah. Just, I feel like both of your films have such a distinct crescendo as well to a singular point, and I was wondering, like, if you had that crescendo in mind as you were like in the beginning stages of your filmmaking, and you saw, and how you saw that through, or if it was kind of something you were like, okay, now it's all like falling into place, you know exactly where this point is going to be.
Yeah, I think it was in my mind from the start because I was prioritizing like creating a feeling or staying in the main character's state of mind over the plot. So it allowed us to really improvise in the writing and on set and in the edit. So I was like rewriting the script as we went through rehearsals based on what the actors came up with. And then when we got on set, a lot of the shots were very improvised, just like following people around, especially the ballerinas. And that gave us like so much to work with in the edit. But in the original script, I wasn't planning to have a non-linear story. And that came about once we got to the editing process. And I think that worked out well in the end because I think we were like blending past and present, blending surrealism and realism. And the edit was able to kind of tie all of that together really simply because we had such a simple story to work with.
I just wanted to comment too, Hannah. I loved how the ending like didn't have like a resolve. I think that's like there's always like this kind of like push to like some sort of resolve, and like I thought was like really phenomenal to have that. Like you have this moment of the screaming, and then you realize, okay, maybe that wasn't what was like necessary, because you still have to like return to that space that just had this like really anxiety provoking moment. So I thought that was like a really brilliant decision on your part. And to your question, Jacalyn, I think, yeah, I had like head come apart in my storyboards, like literally written in. I didn't know what it was gonna look like. That was just like the feeling, and it was like this kind of like bursting at the seams. And so that was kind of like where it landed when it came to actually like putting pen to paper.
Thank you all for your insights. Yeah, and just to go back about like lack of resolution, I feel like you all like have had such a good way of like portraying something that's so complex, but fitting it into this short film, which I just would like to commend you all on, and really like balancing all of the different complexities that come with that. And yeah, I just I think that's really awesome. And sorry, I'm just going through my notes again. Yeah, I would love to hear about too, like where these films take place in all of your like filmmaking careers and aspirations. I noticed, Hannah, that this film was your like directorial debut. I'd love to hear like any advice you potentially have for the people watching this, and what that process was like, as well as for you, McKenna and Grace. Just like, was this your first film you animated? What are your next steps and hopes?
Sure, I can start. Yeah, it was my directorial debut, and I guess my advice would be make something really low budget for your first film, because it just takes all the pressure away. I think this film was made for under $500, like including festival submissions. So it just allowed me to be like so free on set, and like we got to improvise a lot and just like have fun because there was no pressure of losing money. And as far as next steps, I have my next short in development right now. I'm still finishing up the screenplay, and I'm hoping to shoot it in this coming winter.
Awesome, congratulations.
I can comment next. This was my first like film that I'd finished as part of my program. So that was like really interesting. First opportunity to work with a sound designer and someone who does score, which was like an incredible process. Yeah, I mean, I'm glad I like to finish something. I think finishing a film can sometimes be like the hardest challenge, and like kind of writing your name off and sending it off to festivals. So this is also the premiere. CineYouth is the premiere, so that was like a really fantastic and exciting thing. And now I'm currently in production for my thesis film. So yeah.
Yeah, I can jump in. This was definitely my first film like ever. I was in my senior year of art school, but I don't really have a film background. I did painting my whole undergrad, and then senior year is supposed to be a senior project. Like you dedicate the whole year to it, and everything I was trying, it was just not gelling with me. And I think since these big events happened in my life that were like totally taking up my mental space, I just talked to some of my advisors and I'm like, I really want to do this. And they're like, okay, we'll like try to assist you in whatever way makes sense. And then from there was just trial and error. And I somehow landed on animation, and I like loved it because I've always really liked storytelling. I did like creative writing as my minor, but I never got the chance to combine those in a way. So, yeah, it was kind of bizarre. Like I had no idea what I was doing, and I just like slowly tried different things. And by the end, I was like, "This is my film," and I wasn't sure how to feel about it. But it was a great experience. Like I learned so much about how to do everything just by forcing myself to, basically.
Yeah, that actually directly answers an audience question that we had just coming in about like what the challenges you had while like writing and creating that. And yeah, another audience question that just came in too for Hannah, was your actress an actual dancer? And like, how did you work with her on that? And if she was a dancer or not? And like, what was the process behind that?
She had working knowledge of dance. I'll just give credit to Mariana Castro, who put so much work into the process of preparing for this role, because she actually started taking dance classes and like really committed. And she learned so much that she was able to like know terms to talk with the kids about on set. And yeah, she was amazing. And then as far as like the choreography, I'm also not a dancer, but we practiced some of the choreography together. So it was really funny. Like the scene where the man grabs her, I was practicing as the man with her, and I'm like dragging her across the floor, like trying to figure out the choreography. And then we got on set, and I was like to Nick, who played the man, I was like, do you think you're going to be able to do this? Like I could barely get this move down, and he just like lifted her right up. But yeah, they were all amazing. All of the ballerinas as well. A lot of them did have dance history, so that made it nice on set.
Also, the kids were like fantastic in the sense that like felt very organic. Like the one boy like falling and making everyone laugh. I don't know if that was scripted or not, but I'm gonna just say it is, and it's incredible. Very smart.
It was not scripted, but like we came up with it in the moment. And honestly, like the kids were so great overall. They weren't supposed to play that big of a role in the film, but I didn't have any time to rehearse with them. So when we got on set, I was just like running them through exercises. And then Carlos, who was the DP, was just like following us around with the camera, and they ended up adding so much to the story that otherwise wouldn't have been there. So that was amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, that's so impressive, especially considering I feel like any like short film, student-ish film, it's always like don't work with kids, like avoid it at all costs. Did you have any like other challenges with like getting those kids and the ballerinas to work with you, or was it did the improvisation and just like your flexibility really lend itself to working with all of them?
Yeah, I really can't say I had any issues with them. Like they were just so incredible and like inquisitive. Like they didn't even have much knowledge of the story ahead of time, and they were asking me like, so is this in her dream right now, or are we in reality? And I was just like, wow, like I'm so impressed. But yeah, they were amazing. And I would say again, like having the low budget and being really flexible on set helped, because it was just like the film set was like a playground, especially when you have 12 kids on set. It was just really fun.
That's really awesome. Thank you for sharing. And yeah, I guess McKenna, just along with like I know that you talked about like the difficulties and just like learning curve of working with a sound designer for the first time. Was there anything else that you were working through as you created your film as far as challenges?
Yeah, so I started the pitch for the film was like the week I last year at Parsons School of Design, and I flew home for March break to Toronto, and then found out I wasn't going back. And somehow we just had to come to class on Tuesday morning and like pitch an idea for a film. And so thank goodness for my professors and like the calm that they were able to provide us as we became working on this process. But I think like, ultimately adjusting to working at home, you're no longer you don't have the studio spaces or any of like the stuff that you would have at school, which is why this was done a lot on an iPad, because I didn't have my tablet with me. And then just kind of as well, like trying to get used to like everything what's going on. I just like threw myself into the film. It was like crazy turnaround of like a month or 6 weeks or something like that. And it was just like a placeholder for that time for me to put all my anxious energy into. And I hope it's okay if I ask a question, but Grace, I was wondering, like for you, like how much time, like I think when you're talking about heavy subjects, it can be almost exhausting to work on it, especially if this is like your graduation project. So I'd love to hear about like your balance in that, and like if it was like a good tool to process it, or you had to take breaks from it as well. Like,
I kind of like I thought it was sort of cathartic for me. So like definitely more of the like other thing you said, where it was sort of like a processing tool. And I think just the scale of the project and how many challenges there were in it, like actually made me want to work on it more. Cause I was kind of like, oh, I really want this to be good. Cause it's like one of the, like, I've never done this. Like, what if it's like just a flop? So I think I kind of put pressure on myself to be like, oh, this has to be really good. And like, I'll spend all my time in the computer lab working on it. So yeah, it was definitely like depressing at times, or would make me emotional, and then I would kind of step away. But I think in its own weird backwards way, it was like very motivational. And I also felt a weird sense of like, if it's going to have my sister in it and like her boyfriend who passed away, I wanted it to be done right and feel still kind of respectful. I don't know. I felt a weird weight that like it needed to be good. So that oddly motivated me. Yeah.
Was it ever like a prospect to like collaborate with your sister, or did you always want it to be like this like personal, like focused story?
I think it started out, like I said, when I was initially going to do like just a straight documentary where I would film her. It started out more collaborative, and then I just kind of came to the realization that if it's coming from me, it probably should just be told from my perspective and like my how I remembered events. And it's obviously a story about her, but it's also a story about our relationship as sisters. And I think once I made that shift from like, okay, it's not about my, like her, like she's not the subject, it's more like me narrating, it got a lot more comfortable for me. And I felt like I could take creative control versus initially I was hesitant because I was like, this feels like I don't want to upset her every single time we have to talk about this. And it was like, so I kind of just was like, I'll do my own thing and show it to her. She knew it was happening and I gave her some updates, but I just showed it to her when I was done with it so that we could watch it together. But yeah, so I guess it was sort of just me. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Did McKenna or Hannah, did either of you have any like collaborators as you were working through this, or was it mostly just like, I know McKenna, you like made this in a pandemic, so that is still going on, so that's like way different. But I'd love to hear more about what you guys are drawn to as far as like more individual or collaborative.
Yeah, well, mine was a huge collaborative process. And I really think like this film was a lesson for me in that as soon as, if you're the writer of the script, as soon as you share it with other people, every person you bring on is going to change the story and it's going to be out of your control. And that's for the best. Like, it's so great to have other minds working on things. And so, of course, like I give so much credit of how this film turned out to every person who worked on it along the way. But I mean, McKenna, you could still answer this question, but I also wanted to hear from both of you, like, because you both have animations. So how were you able to portray some of these emotions through the animation format, or like what were you able to do with animation as opposed to live action?
Yeah, I mean, this was like the collaboration really took place at the end with my sound designer. But that was like the animation was like already done at that point, and just kind of like leaning on like my peers and my mentors, like they were extremely helpful through all of that process. And then also like figuring out when it was done. That was my biggest struggle, is like, okay, do I keep working on this? Because I'm sure Grace will agree, but with animation, like it's, you can just revisit. Like it's literally as simple as pulling up a Photoshop file and like redoing and redoing. So that was really hard for me. It was like being able to say, okay, it's done now. Yeah, and I think too, like the moment that I knew I kind of was going to be able to capture the emotion was like when I did the character design. Like that was like the most important part. And I started with the hands. Oddly enough, it was like the hands were the first way to begin to convey that. And then just going from there and like moving the way that things should move through the space, and then not knowing how to animate that much. So just like relying on boils and stillness was like very important for me when making this film. I don't know about I'd love to hear what you have to say, Grace.
Yeah, in terms of like, well, also, I guess the collaboration question, I feel like I definitely should say that it wasn't like that I made this in a vacuum. Like I had really amazing professors that gave me a ton of guidance in different stages and pushed me more, or like, were like, you need to, like, you should cut this part out. Like people would just give me critique and it was great. Same with like other students I was working with. But yeah, in terms of emotion, I think really what made my piece more emotional was just my own voice as the narration, because I think everyone has that thing where they're like, oh, I hate the sound of my own voice, and I was so hesitant at the beginning, but it also like kind of had to be me saying these things. And I felt like the animations themselves were very like a little bit static and a little bit, I wouldn't say boring, but it was sort of supposed to be a little stilted and just like really, like I've said, I feel like I've used the word fragment a lot, but very fragmented and just like glimpses in time. So maybe like a really simple, like one movement over and over. That was like really important to me, especially the opening sequences were just about like how time can feel so slow when you're grieving something, where it's just like something, coffee dripping or like riding the bus, and like every day sort of felt the same and like a little sad. So it was really important for me. And I used that to my advantage because I'm not a very skilled animator and I didn't know what I was doing. So it's like, oh, great, like one repeating sequence. But I think for my subject matter, it lended itself to that really well.
Yeah, I thought it was really cool how your structure was like both like chronological in terms of like a year passing, but also how you incorporated all those like reflective elements with the photographs, with your voice, with like the journal. You like really pieced that all wonderfully together. So props to you on that. Yeah, really awesome. And then also McKenna, I really loved how you were talking more about your world and like the rules that you had to create for like something again that like doesn't exist. Out after you like were able to figure out this character, was there anything else that you were like, okay, this is like what another rule of like this world you're creating?
Yeah, I think I mean, like after deciding the character and like the sequence of the scenes, it was like, okay, a question of like, what do we bring back from like the world? Like at first I had her like actually taking like I don't know what it's called, taking a breath in from a cigarette and then blowing out the smoke. And then it was like, no, cut that. Like we don't need learning like what objects are necessary to conveying this space. And then even like I had objects in like the walk cycle and the smoke scene, and I was like, no, like just kind of sorting out like what needs to be there. And then for the sake of time and like skill as well, like not having like clear backgrounds, like I had so many like other elements brought in, and thankfully with the help of my professors, like figuring out what to cut out and like what's necessary, and like kind of even after like animating something and putting like a lot of time and energy and work into it, saying, you know what, actually this doesn't help what I'm trying to convey, and it might even like take away from it. And that, I feel like that's always a hard process when you're filmmaking, is then going through and editing. And someone said that animators are the worst editors. I don't know why, but I think maybe it's just like there's like an attachment to like every single frame that you draw. So yeah, it came with like setting rules for the sake of time, and then also the sake of the story as well.
I know, Hannah, you talked about your editing process being really crucial to like figuring out your story. Did you have any moments like that where you're just like, we really don't need this, or like, we really do need this while you were in the editing room?
I think it's very similar to McKenna, like what you said about animators are the worst editors. Also directors, like it's hard to let go of something that you wrote or really took time on. And so much of my film was actually scrapped in the editing room. So it was a big process of letting go. Like the first time I was sitting with Don, my editor, and he was like, we should try editing this nonlinear. And I was like, okay, like, but are we gonna have to get rid of like this whole conversation scene? He's like, yeah. Like, and then we just cut it. And I think like at least trying it out and seeing what can happen, and then just like moving on from there, like let that go. That was a big lesson for me for sure, but I'm happy with how it turned out.
Definitely. Yeah, just again, all of your films were just so distinct and personal, and really props to all of you. So unless any of you all have any other questions for each other, I know that that has been a theme throughout this Q&A. We are getting a little close to the end of our time. So, but thank you all for being here. I'm super grateful. And for this time to hear about all your thoughts and processes and just like filmmaking in general, really exciting. And I hope that everyone back home watching enjoyed this Q&A. And yeah, make sure to check out all the other films in the program this weekend. So
thank you so much, Jacalyn.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you all.